Hello, time for another Man in Gray book review. Today's book is The Book of Beginnings and Endings by Jenny Boully, published in 2007 by Sarabon Books. It's 128 pages. Now, this book says on the cover that it's a book of essays, but that's not really true. In fact, it's kind of difficult to define what this book is. It doesn't really fit into any category too well. I would say probably the best description of it is that it's a experimental novel. There are parts of it that are nonfiction. But most of it's fiction. Basically, the conceit here, or the gimmick, if you will, is that what Boully has done is that on the odd-numbered pages, she's written the first page of an imaginary book. Some of them are novels, some of them are short stories, some of them are memoirs, some of them are essays, nonfiction books, so forth. And then on the even-numbered pages, she's written the last page. So that's what's called the Book of Beginning and Endings. It's made up of the first and last pages of made-up books, and you're supposed to fill in the rest of the book because you're only given the first and last pages. In some ways, this is related or similar to a 1979 novel by the Italian novelist Italo Calvino, who wrote a novel back in 79 called If on a Winter's Night, a Traveler. And in that book, he writes the first chapter of 10 different novels, and then he also writes chapters where someone's reading the book. So it's a very postmodernist meta thing. But in that case, unlike this, you get whole chapters. So you're able to kind of get going on a story and know what the characters are before it ends. Here, you've only got one page, and sometimes not even that. Some of the last pages are just 2 or 3 paragraphs long. And so the problem with this book, of course, is that if you're only writing a page and then you switch off to something else, you don't really have time to develop characters, a plot of any kind, or really get any, really do much of anything. But the book is still worth reading because Boully's a really remarkable writer. She's got a real gift for language, and I'm going to read a couple of excerpts from this book to give you an idea why. But if you're looking for a conventional set of essays, this isn't it. It's not a conventional novel. The whole point of it is to start and stop, and then you're supposed to piece together. And the beginnings and endings are not together. The beginning of some of the books are at the front of the book, and then the endings of the other books are scattered around the back. There is a theme that kind of unites the whole thing, and that's the theme of loss. There are books in here, are imaginary books about death, loss of a loved one, the breaking up of a marriage or a loving relationship. And there's even sections on the death of plants. There's a book of botany in here that describes the death of plants. So let me go ahead and read a first page and a last page from this book and give you kind of an idea of what it's like. So I'm going to start off with the first page of one of these things. There ought not to be erasers or cleaning solvents, those things which make it possible to no longer believe in permanence. What warning was there other than knowing that one day we would become big? It would no longer be so easy to talk about the times we played house. It isn't so much that our bodies became misrepresentations of what we were, but rather that the meaning of everything had altered, had become suffused with a once hidden mortality, the once obscured fatal connotations, the whole world in conspiracy, the very violets whispering, the very conniving spiders weaving dye. What could I do then but continue wearing my too small pink nightgown, the butterfly embroidered slip? When my breast began to swell, so tiny, I bent forward my shoulders, began to forever look to the ground. It would be my last Easter gathering, the eggs my father had so preciously hid. And like a grand magician closing the sliding door curtain behind him, effectively veiling the outside. That spring, we dug a fish pond in the backyard right outside my bedroom window. At night, the bullfrogs crouched around the pond's lip to croak out loud, then soft, then full of longing again. I too dreamed of a touch that would bring new life. Mornings, the water would swell with the gossamer strands of eggs, little black beads threaded through the entrails. When they hatched like a plague. Baby frogs hid everywhere, sprouted forth from our cabbage, from our ears of corn. Only the loose slugs were more frightening, and they came out only at night. I loved a boy. My diary became a huge, messy confession. I timed my walks to school to be sure that I would meet him. He would never like me back. Years later, when I became beautiful, he would ask me if I remembered. How can one forget the first black stain, the acquired fragileness that keeps us forever from becoming whole? In gym class, I turned my back to, and that's where it stops. So you got several things going on here. This is clearly a memoir looking back on the author's childhood. Whether it's an actual memoir or whether this is all made up, it's not clear. All right, so now I'm going to skip to one of the ending pages. This is the last page of a book, and this has something also to do with plants. The difference being that certain plants will not, come spring, grow again. For these, they must be uprooted. There's no sense in keeping them alive until the first frost kills. And so, come autumn, my father would busy himself with the uprooting of hundreds of pepper plants. Their leaves were still green, and some still bore a green or late post-harvest fruit here and there. I would pick them and bring them to Mother. Instead of entering the compost pile, the pepper bushes would crowd together in one little heap, as if trying to keep warm. Eventually, they would pale and loosen their foliage until they resembled a family of lost sagebrush. Even in this final stage, I could still smell fresh spring earth on them. Father, using a contraption that looked like a metal hourglass with a turn handle, would turn the bushes into small splinters, and like so many crematory ashes, these were placed into the compost. The compost would, come spring, serve to feed the crops that, more than the others, like to rise from rot, okra, and asparagus, but the peppers kept rising from seed of last year's kin, never needing to feed off the dead. And that's the end of that. So, gives you an idea of what this is like. It's all like that, first and last pages of made-up books. One of her earlier books was actually made up entirely of footnotes, so it's a thing that she does. Okay, so if that sounds intriguing to you, you might want to pick it up. If you're looking for a conventional novel or a conventional essay collection, this is not for you. So it just kind of depends on what you're interested in. But if you're interested in experimental writing, this is certainly experimental. The book is The Book of Beginnings and Endings. The author is Jenny Boully. This has been another Man in Gray book review. Thanks for watching.